All right, good morning, everyone. It is Monday, the 24th day of April, 2023. I'm Mayor Chris Jensen coming to you from Noblesville in kind of a new location. Kristen Boyce and I were just talking about that. Under construction here in the office a little bit, so switching it up a little bit. But I am here once again joined by my good friend, a true patriot when it comes to mental health and giving of her time, Kristen Boyce, owner of Pathways to Healing Counseling. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Mayor Jensen. Good to be here today.
Always awesome to be here today. You can see behind me blue skies here in Noblesville. I hope it's blue skies wherever you are around the world because we know we have an international audience, which is awesome. But yeah, blue skies here in Noblesville. A little chilly, but sometimes the sun can just do wonders for you. And I was talking to my mom this morning, who I know is tuning in this morning. It was just nice to see the sunshine today. So welcome to April's edition of Mental Health Monday, where we tackle all sorts of topics around mental health. And today is going to be no different. We're gonna dive into some communication styles, which Chris and I were talking offline is the root of all challenges in life at times, day and night, all the time. And then the difference between shame and guilt, very different things. And we're going to talk a little bit about what they look like, how they're different, how they're similar, and how maybe some tools that you can kind of help self-identify what you are dealing with or those around you are dealing with. So did I cover my topics correctly, Kristen?
You got it all.
And of course, any topic that you want to address who's watching here today, if you have a question, a comment, feedback, feel free to live chat it with us. We'll try to get to it on the air. Obviously, we have actually thousands that watch this after the fact. So if you have some questions, we'll follow up from you later if we don't have any answers for you on the fly. But if you are listening live and want to say hi or simply want to ask a question, feel free to do that and chime in. But before we go anywhere on any topic conversation, we need to do a little exercise to get us prepared for that conversation. With that, I'll turn it over to Kristen.
So we're going to practice square breathing together. You can do this anytime, anywhere. We're going to start with our feet on the floor so we can center our nervous system. And then I'm going to add something in today that we haven't done before is notice one thing in the room right in front of you. So this is another way to bring you back to the present moment. So you may pick something in the room. It could be looking out the window. It could be an object. It could be a picture. Anything in the room, you're going to look at it, shape, size, color, texture. If you ever feel like a panicky feeling inside, this is a great strategy to use to get back to center. So you keep looking at that object, it slows things down, brings you back to the present, and it shifts out of the brainstem, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop, into the prefrontal cortex. So orient yourself to the space and feel your feet on the floor. We're going to do square breathing where we inhale through our nose for 4, we hold for 4, and slowly exhale out our mouths like we're cooling soup or cooling a cookie for kids. So let's practice 2 breaths together. Feet on the floor, pressing into your feet, noticing your surroundings. Deep inhale through your nose. And we're going to hold and then release. It's almost like you're letting all of those worries, all of that tension and tightness, all of that anxiety out of your body to release it and let it go. So one more breath, feeling your feet on the floor, deep inhale through your nose and hold. The hold is important. And then release. I usually recommend to clients to keep going as many breaths as they need, or if they're driving and they need to calm down, maybe they're tense or tight, or they're feeling like they're going to be late to something, keep breathing to recenter your nervous system and come back to that prefrontal cortex.
Love square breathing. I can tell you too, that is something you can use for all ages. I was just kudos to Julie Jensen this weekend. We have a beautiful 2-year-old is our final chapter of our kid installment in our family, and she can be a little spicy at times. And this weekend we were working on trying to work through some square breathing with her, but it's just trying to talk about it early and often in our house as much as possible to get kids kind of refocused a little bit. So it can be used all the time. Hey, shout out to my buddy Tanner from Napanee. Love Napanee, Indiana, by the way. That's a new one. So thanks for tuning in. And Kathy Hines, love you. Happy sunshiny day to you as well. So question real quick before we move on to our topics. You mentioned freeze, flight, fawn, flop. Flop was new to me. Do you want to
Flop.
discuss that?
Yeah, let's talk about flop. Flop is more like a faint response. I
Okay.
don't know if you've ever had a situation where you've walked into something that was very overwhelming and your nervous system almost goes into shock and it's where you faint. So your body just kind of flops. It's a traumatic release of it's kind of getting frozen in the body almost. So we call that the flop response. And the fawn response is where you're people pleasing.
Mhm.
You're trying to accommodate the person so that they're happy with you, they're pleased with you, they're not reactive to you. And we learn that oftentimes in childhood. So that's another one people might not know about. It's called fawn. Fight, of course, is where we go into that defense of trying to protect ourselves. Flee is where we want to mobilize that traumatic response. So in freeze, we know what that one is where we kind of feel frozen in time.
Yeah, that was just a new one there. I just didn't want to let it pass without at least addressing it. So thank you for talking about flopping. That's a new one for me today. So, all right, let's dive into communication. Well, Kristen, you and I were talking about this beforehand. Communication, effective communication, lack of communication, over communication, all the realms of communication are essential to our everyday work. I said my job the last 3.5 years being mayor has been a case study in communication. That can usually be the root of all challenges that we face at home. Communication between Julie Jensen and I is something we work on all the time. And I think we've talked about on the show. Her and I have very different communication styles. I like to talk it out immediately. She wants to process it and type it out. At least we know where we're at with that. Communication with our kids. It's everywhere we look. And I'm sure there are great ways to do it. There are not great ways to do it. There's effective, there's non-effective. So we're going to dive right into kind of talking around what effective looks like. And Kristen, you maybe can probably talk us through some misconceptions around communication and what that may look like. But it's something that we all can relate to today.
And I think it's something we're not talking about enough. I looked around, the reason I sparked this topic is because I see we're not teaching kids effective communication tools. So then we go generations with not learning. We don't see oftentimes our parents have healthy communication skills. We don't experience it at a job. And so what I'm really passionate about is equipping people on how to, because they're like, I don't know how to, like, I don't even know where to begin or how to start it. So the first thing is our body language. So if I go in with my arms like this and I'm like, I'm like, my face is tight. You can already feel that feeling. And you're like, oh, you're almost like bracing yourself. The first thing is notice your own body language. So you have to feel your feet on the floor, the breathing we did at the very beginning. That's how I recommend couples that come into counseling. That's how we start every single session. So we can stay regulated before we have a conversation. The second thing is I set some ground rules, and these are really, really important for family systems. So if I have a family I'm working with, we talk about not interrupting, because how many times do we want to cut the person off because we don't agree with what they said? We experienced it or perceived the situation differently, and we want to jump in there and tell them how that's not accurate. That's not right. That usually goes south. So no interrupting, not starting with you always, you never, not starting our sentences off with you, because immediately I want to go, I feel like you're attacking me. So a lot of people will come into couples therapy and like, you're attacking me, because we're not starting with an I feel statement. And a lot of people think I feel like you. That's how they'll do the I feels. And I'm like, well, that's an opinion. We just
Not
did the
the first
same
word,
thing.
though.
Yeah, we kind of reframed it, but it kind of is the same outcome. So I feel sad, using those core emotions we talked about: sad, scared. I feel excited, maybe. Sometimes that's a word. A lot of times people aren't coming out with that. Angry, disgusted, disappointed. I feel, and then you're going to put your emotion in there, and then you can say because. So for example, if I feel sad because let's say I texted my husband and he never responded, and it was something pretty vulnerable, I might say, I feel really sad that I texted you something that was very vulnerable and you never responded. That really was hurt my feelings, or that really hurt, or however I'm going to say that. And then what we work on in couples is someone being able to watch our defenses, So immediately not build a case. Well, I didn't mean to hurt you. People will respond that way. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just. So if someone starts with I was just, I'm like, ooh, red flag, because now you're justifying. Think of I was just as justifying what you are doing rather than listening to understand. So I like to have people say, take I just out of your vocabulary. So I was just, you know, I was so busy. I didn't want to text you back. I wanted to do it in person. So I was just going to wait until we got home. So now I'm like justifying what I did instead of going, I am so sorry. I can see how you're really vulnerable. I am so sorry. I thank you for sharing that with me. So if you want your kids to open up with you, thank you for sharing is so important without like, thank you for sharing. And you're just like, my facial expressions doesn't match up with my words. So in communication, it's super important that your words and your body language match, because the other person will interpret that and go, well, I don't really trust what you're saying, because your face is saying you're really angry, but you're saying you're not. So thanking someone for that feedback, not interrupting, not using you always, you never, listening to understand. Those are some key elements to communication, using I feel with a feeling in there, mirroring back what you hear. That's a key concept. So we know in leadership, I heard an interview from Warren Buffett, who's as most people know, a multimillionaire who's built many companies, has a family, etc. He said, you know what, the number one, and they're like, what's the reason for your success? And he said, the number one, bar none, barring anything else, was communication. Number one, he said, I could not have built what I did without effective communication. And someone said, well, what does that mean? It means listening to understand. And he also used emotional intelligence. So what does that mean? That means understanding feelings and emotions. And we don't teach this. We didn't grow up with this. I alluded to that at the beginning with our core emotions. It's understanding and having empathy for someone else's experience, even if you don't agree with it. So a lot of people were like, well, I didn't agree with what they said, so I'm not going to offer empathy. I'm like, empathy does not equal agreement. It means you can understand perhaps how that person might feel sad, even though you might not agree with it. So that might be like, oh, that makes sense that you feel sad. I could totally see how me not responding caused you to feel sad and hurt. That's empathy. Getting defensive is, well, I was just, going to wait till we got home. And it's a totally different, I'm disconnected then. There's not a connection point there. The last thing I want to say about communication is clarity, not dancing around subjects. So I'll have couples in session and they're saying something and I have no idea what they're saying, because they're like, and I mean, you're not like trying to hurt me, but what you really said was kind of hurtful, but they're just dancing around it. I'm like, well, okay, say what you mean and mean what you say. So let's try saying it in one sentence directly. I feel sad because, so I give people frameworks, because if we don't have a centered message, oftentimes someone else is completely lost in what you're saying and you're afraid the person is going to be upset or you're going to hurt the other person. So you're not clear. So we end up going like this, two ships passing in the night. We have no idea what the other person just said. So be clear and direct and concise with a lot of compassion and empathy mixed in there.
So I want to unpack several things that you said. You probably hear some noise in the background. That's my team's eyes rolling down the hallway after you just mentioned the clear component, because we have a saying in our office, clear is kind. And I find myself to be, I pride myself at times, Kristen, of being very clear with what I mean. And I think, but can we talk a little bit about, is there ever a point where you're maybe a little too clear? And it probably involves that empathy piece. Also, note of vulnerability. Empathy is probably one of my biggest weaknesses. I'm just working on it. Okay. But I think sometimes, can you be too clear? And ruffle some feathers that way, maybe?
Well, I think it's all how other people perceive it, which you can't control. Mm-hmm. So it depends if you're coming from, you're being rude or nasty, which I don't think you would be. But I'm just saying, if someone comes from a place of dysregulation and anger, it can come across as almost people will frame it as I'm being brutally honest.
Yeah.
And that's a totally different thing. Being clear and direct is I am calm. I'm coming from a centered, grounded place. I am not coming from dysregulation. I am not coming from a defensive place. I have already sifted through I know what the message is. And being clear and direct is kind. I think people's nervous systems sense out inauthenticity and untruth. And I think people are tired of it. People want kind truth, not where you're like vomiting on someone. You're being clear, kind, and direct. And people's nervous systems respond so much better than if you're dancing around something. Or someone said the other day that when someone goes on and on and on and on and on and on why they couldn't do something, it feels inauthentic. And they're just like, why don't you just say I can't do it without giving me all the litany of why you can't? I don't want all that. It makes me feel like you're lying and that you're not telling me the whole truth.
What I would say, I always tell my team here too, with the clearest kind message, as long as you're coming from a place of kindness and genuine concern for someone, me being kind and clear, in my opinion, is much more kind than giving you false information or false hope. Or, I would say if you aren't clear and kind, the eventual truth will come out. And then it almost looks disingenuous and pulls your integrity into question at times.
And it erodes trust.
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
What you're saying. It erodes trust. So if someone isn't clear and kind, eventually you don't believe what they're saying. You're like, I feel like you're placating me, which is when you kind of just say something so someone won't be upset with you. And we learn that in childhood where we go, okay, we just kind of keep the peace so we don't want anyone upset. That is the opposite of clear and direct. That's the conditioned response we learn to protect ourselves. So if we're placating, we're trying to protect ourselves, but then we're not allowed to be our authentic selves. There's a disconnect and we don't feel seen and heard because we're not really being real with how we feel.
Well, and you were talking about how dancing around things. I think that's a huge part of things at times. I use in the office, I would say land the plane. That's my line. Robert's laughing right now because that's my line. Land the plane. Stop circling on the issue. Land the plane. So that's just something that little trick that I use with myself too. It's like, am I over describing this? Am I just get to the point?
And people have a hard time with it because they're afraid.
Especially if it's not a good feel good thing. You know what I mean? Like if it's easy, like you look nice today, plane landed. You know what I mean? But something that's more difficult, you're going to circle for a while. Land the plane.
It's because people are afraid they're going to upset the other person, that there's going to be rejection, abandonment, disconnection, disapproval. Maybe if you're afraid of getting fired, whatever the fear is, it causes you to want to hide how you really feel, or you're afraid of the other person's reaction or response.
So I want to hone in a little bit on this communication piece. If I am the receiver of information, if somebody was willing to be clear and kind with me to tell me how they feel, which I genuinely appreciate, can you give me some tips on, that empathy, like some real targeted words like, hey, I challenge you to start a response with X.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing that. I can imagine how hard that was to say that to me. That's a very safety built response. Now, if I go, I'm doing this, well, thank you for sharing, but my body language doesn't match up. This is so important in communication. I cannot emphasize body language and facial expressions enough. I can't judge how someone perceives my body language and facial expressions. I can only come from a place of center. And it may have triggered me. It may have brought something up in me. I'm responsible for managing that. So if they said it kindly and they said it directly, my responsibility is to manage what that brought up in me. So thank you so much for sharing that. And if you need a minute, just say, I'm going to need a minute just to kind of sit with that and be with that. You may need a minute. That's okay.
Is it okay to maybe need more than a minute? And is there an instance where we're like, hey, I'm going to put a pin in that, or I'm going to put that in the parking lot for right now and walk away?
Here's the essential component to this. This is especially relevant for couples. Okay. When someone says, thank you for sharing that, I'm going to need a minute to process, it's on the receiver to let the sender know. So if it's, a partnership, to say, thank you for sharing that. That really brought up a lot for me. I'm going to need some time. Can we circle back to this and an hour. It's important for the other person to have kind of a timeline. If you
Because
don't,
they've been vulnerable and
they've
offer
been
that up.
vulnerable and that was hard for them potentially. Maybe some people it's easier, but a lot of people it is hard. And so I like to say, can I bookmark that? I am going to sit with that. It is important to me what you said. It's just bringing up a lot in me. And I want to make sure I'm very centered in how I respond to you. And I don't say something that's going to be hurtful. Perhaps you're afraid of that. So let me take some time. And that person needs to do the work to either write out what it brought up, sit with it, process it. Because if you're just shoving it under the rug, that's not fair to the other person. And so it's important we know how to handle feedback. That's really an essential ingredient of communication. So if my window of tolerance for any kind of conflict or any kind of difficult conversation is like this, it's going to be my system probably will go into shutdown, and that's on me. So if I need to be able to build my window of tolerance for those kinds of conversations that are uncomfortable for me or build up something. So everybody listening, you kind of need to assess what is your window of tolerance for hard conversations. And that's on you to kind of work through and manage, not the sender. Now, if the sender delivered it in not a healthy way, that's a different conversation.
Yeah. Like I said, that's just, those are incredible elements there to kind of understand that tough conversations are going to happen in every environment that you're in. And I think some pre-work from each one of us, knowing going into them, how we receive them, how we give them is essential. And also I just give a little grace on both sides of that going forward.
Yes, and here's one other piece I want to say is we learn this in family systems. So this is why I love to have families in therapy because I'm like, yay! Now we know, or couples even that are parents, here's how we can as a family talk about difficult conversations. We all need to be centered. It's up to you to stay regulated. And when somebody shares something that may hurt, you're responsible for nurturing that. Not, the other person can't make you feel better. They can acknowledge and have empathy and grace, but it's up to us to do that work of nurturing that hurt part in us to say, okay, thank you for sharing. I have to be able to handle if it was delivered kindly and directly in a healthy way. So then the person will do it again. So if I come back at the person and I attack the person, they're not going to probably want to share with me again because they're going to shut down and go into freeze. This is why family system work is so essential to learning how to have healthy conversations. And what I'm seeing now is it's a challenge for families and kids to have hard conversations. They steer away from that. I'm like, did you talk about it with each other? And they're like, ooh, no. Well, you know why? Because they didn't learn that it was safe as a child. So they're thinking it's going to recreate the same dynamic they might have seen growing up, or that they might have been on the receiving end of like they brought something up and it went south consistently. Then they're more hesitant to bring something up. Without healthy communication, we cannot have connection.
And I imagine as time goes on, if you're not willing to address hard conversations, people that are dealing with those hard conversations will look to other ways to numb themselves, or which is a whole nother conversation down the road of how the vices we turn to, and how that can actually just perpetuate the problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're not easy subjects. We have grief and loss. We have, addictions in families. We have, workaholism. We have, social media. There's so many things taking us away from facing pain, facing emotion, facing really seeing one another. And pain is hard. Like we want to move away from pain and we want to put a shiny, like everything's wonderful. Well, that's not reality. The truth of the matter is we all have pain. Every human being on the planet has pain. And how do we handle the pain in a family, in a relational dynamic? Or do we have empathy? Have we taught empathy? Have we taught about emotions and they're all welcome in the home? Have we taught about self-regulation? Have we demonstrated those things? And we're never going to do it perfectly. Believe me, I need to say that for starters. I'm not like, oh, misregulated all the time. Absolutely not. I'm a human being. And then I have to have self compassion when I am not regulated.
Yeah.
And when I maybe have said something I don't mean and I need to do a repair. So part of communication is repair work. If we can't have these hard conversations, we can't get to repair work. Well, most family systems didn't know how to do repair work.
Yeah, this is the most 25. This is the most regulated I've been all day. Minutes. So, and I want to, we talked about getting into shame and guilt and shame, but we may have to put a pin in that and come back to it because I want to stick on this communication topic a little bit too, because I want to hit on, there's a lot of parents that watch this show just to deal with themselves, not deal with themselves, to work on themselves. Sorry, bad word choice. But, if I'm a parent and I think every generation's trying to parent better or learn from the generation ahead of us and parent down. So if I'm a parent trying to talk to my kids and increase communication, increase empathy, increase a willingness for tough conversations, can you maybe hone in on some advice that we can take, or grandparents if you're in that role? How do we best teach our kids a better communication style?
First of all, you're the model. So it starts with us, and that's hard. The first thing I want to say is you got to build your window of tolerance for these conversations, or you're not going to do it. So it's going to be too uncomfortable. It's going to be too hard. If you're not okay with your own emotions and working through those and allowing them to come forth, your children aren't going to. They're going to learn similar ways to suppress, repress, numb, move away from because they didn't learn it. And so the first step is deciding, oh, emotional intelligence is super important to empathy, to communication, to healthy relationships, to lifelong connections. So it begins with your willingness to look within and discover a lot of self awareness about yourself. When you're triggered, when you're activated, when you're defensive, there's something there for you to explore. And then you're going to give permission to your kids to do the same thing. So in our house, I mean, if you came to our house, you'd be like, is this a therapy session? Like all the time. And my poor kids are like, oh, can we not have a deep conversation? I'm like, thank you. Yes, we can lighten it up. I love inquiring about more than just how was their day. So it might look like, okay, what was, high, lows, thorn, rose, thorn kinds of questions if you're not sure where to start. And it might say, what was one thing that took you by surprise today? What was the thing that kind of triggered you today? What was the thing that really got you today? Like, or did you offer kindness to someone? We did this experiment where we did 3 compliments on our spring break, and we just every day, and then we would talk about the compliments and how did they feel giving the compliment, and genuine. It wasn't just like, let me throw a compliment out there. And how did you feel noticing other people and what they would say to them? And, oh, how did you come up with that to say to them? And they're like, well, I noticed XYZ about them. And doing things that are like just out of the blue, kind of experimental. I like to call them, let's just experiment and see what happens. Those are fun ways to begin the process of stepping out of your comfort zone and then noticing things about. You have to be connected. If you're detached and disconnected, you're not going to notice facial expressions, breath of the person in front of you, like my kid's breath, my husband's. I'm like, ooh, you just took a deep breath there. What came up for you? And they're like, I did. I didn't even notice. And they're like, oh, I was thinking about, this test I have tomorrow, and I'm really afraid I'm going to flunk it. I'm like, oh, tell me about that. That feels overwhelming and hard. I offered empathy, and then I used an open-ended question. Now, if this is not usual for your family system, they're going to give you one-word answers. Fine, nothing. It's going to take time. So you're going to have to really look at the person in front of you. Their eye might have twitched, their breath might have changed, their jaw might have gotten tight. Notice and say, hey, I just noticed you went like that when I said that. What did that bring up for you? These are skills. These are skills that you build over time, but you have to build your window of tolerance for deeper conversation.
I love it, and that's a great way. I was just thinking, I have a 6th grader who is wonderful, but I think we have to be clear on our expectations that if I go home tonight and ask him an open-ended question, he's not just going to lay on the couch and tell me everything that happened at Noblesville West Middle School that
Even though we
day.
would love to know every detail.
I love to know every detail. But yes, it's just, you got to chip away at it a little bit and keep working at it. So, Kristen Boyce, this has been a phenomenal conversation on communication. And it's one that we're going to have to continue because there's just so many facets to it. But I hope for all those watching that you can take away a piece of information that you can implement into your daily life today. I know empathy is something that I'm working on, giving space for those to answer, and then adding empathy into my clear is kind mantra. So Kristen Boyce, this was awesome. Before we wrap things up, if folks are kind of just on the wits end right now, struggling, having a mental health crisis, where do they turn?
988. And you can text or call 24 hours. There's mental health clinicians on the other line. I want to say something about this. My daughter went to a training. She's a Connor Prairie volunteer. And during the training, they asked about this. And she goes, oh, you dial 988. And they're like, how did you know that? Well, mom's a mental health provider. All teens, kids, everyone needs to know about 988. Throw it out like it's candy. Yeah. Let them know if they get into they don't know what to do or they're suicidal, having suicidal thoughts. There is help available. Text or call 988. Let's get that out there, just like 911 is. We need 988 out there for mental health. So share it, tell people about it. Let's spread the word.
Yes. And if you are on a lifelong mental health journey like we all are, join us back next month when we probably conquer or tackle some fear and guilt, or shame and guilt, and the difference between it. And obviously we'll adjust our topics based on what's going on around here. But thank you, Kristen Boyce. As again, you're a blessing in this community. Thanks for sharing and being with us today. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you soon, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thanks.